S Oversight Committee to order. At 5:30. And I always read our opening statement, important because of COVID-19, the notice. In an effort to protect public health and prevent the spread of COVID-19 and to enable appropriate social distancing, the Measure S Citizens Oversight Committee meeting is not open for public attendance at this time. All meetings will be held via teleconference. To view the live meeting, you can go to our San Bernardino City's website, or you can go to Spectrum and Frontier customers and view the broadcast on Channel 3. To provide public comments, you can email your written comment to MSCOCP, well, I should say MSCOC public comments at sbcity.org. You have to email your written comment to that site by 4:00 p.m. the day of the scheduled meeting. Or you can call, and the number is 909-384-5007, and leave a recorded comment not to exceed 3 minutes by 4:00 p.m. the day of the scheduled meeting. The subject line of your email should include the meeting date, Measure S Oversight Committee, and whether it is a public comment or for a specific agenda item. Okay. So with that being said, again, I'll call it to order with roll call of our Measure S committee members. I'll start with myself as the chair and of our Measure S Oversight Committee, Reverend Veronica Martindale for the 6th Ward, and then I'll take it back to recognizing from our 1st Ward roll-off.
Ines Williams, Ward number 1.
Thank you.
Gloria Maya is not present.
Gloria's not? Okay. Okay. We have next, so is our Ward 4. I'm sorry. Ward 4, Michael here. Mr. Gallo.
No, he is not present.
I thank you. Ward 5, you don't have to have me wait. Just if you're next, then go for it.
Anthony Roberson, Ward 5 here, present.
Thank you, Anthony. So Felicia's not here, and Richard Avila is not.
Rick Avila here,
Okay.
appointed by the mayor.
Okay, so Rick is.
And Derek Wesson from Ward 7.
Sorry, repeat that.
Derek Wesson from Ward 7.
Okay, good.
And Cliff Cummings is here.
Excellent. So Derek, I'm sorry, you said that you were Ward 7? And so.
Yes, I'll replace Felicia Alexander.
Okay, so there is a replacement. Okay, I didn't know. Welcome, Derek.
Thank you.
To our Measure S Committee, welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, with that being said, we'd like to do the approval. Well, before that, do you have any public comments that's listed that needs to be gone over?
No, we do not have any public comments.
No public comments, okay. So we would like to address the review of our approval of our minutes for April 19th,
She chose herself to go up there.
2021. So I need to have a motion to move for the approval of those minutes.
I make a motion to approve.
Okay,
I'll
Anthony,
I'll second it.
excellent. It's been moved and seconded to approve the minute. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
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 Okay. Any opposed? Okay, great. Thank you. Meeting approved, meeting minutes are approved. Okay, and today we have a presentation that is going to be done by our Miss Barbara. And this is, I'm going to just turn it right on over to you so that you can open it up and share with us what you're presenting to us for today.
I'm Measure S Committee Barbara Whitehorn, the Finance Director for the City of San Bernardino, and I'm going to share my screen so y'all can see my PowerPoint. So give me just a second here. Okay, hopefully you can see that now.
Yes, we do see it. We see your notes on the side though too, Barbara.
Let me see if I can put it in slideshow. Not be configured. No, whatever. All right, now is it slideshow?
No, we still see your sides.
Lame. Hang on one second then.
I think if you go up to the top bar and just hit slideshow and go into
Yeah.
present.
Yeah, it's on my other screen, which is why it is. Let me reshare. Try it again.
It should say slideshow like
There we
Anthony
go.
said.
Screen 3 should work now. All right, you seeing it now?
Yes.
All right, yay! Excellent. Okay, I just had to share the right screen. I have 3 screens, so if I share the wrong one, forget about it. You're going to see the wrong thing.
Well, you got the right one now.
All right, great. Well, so tonight I wanted to give you all an overview of what staff is recommending for the use of Measure S funds in the budget for this coming year. And I know you all have seen our staff report, but I just wanted to reiterate that staff for the coming year isn't recommending using the full amount of the Measure S funds that will be coming in, which is about $41 million we anticipate for the fiscal year 21-22 year. Even though, that full amount could be allocated, staff is just recommending that we be fiscally conservative and not use all that. Now, we certainly could. There is nothing that says we have to reserve a portion of that. That is simply us trying to be a little more prudent with that. And, this is the first full year of that tax being in place. It also is kind of trying to set San Bernardino up for the future to be in a position where if there is an economic downturn, where we sort of have a little more of a reserve in place that we could bridge the gap if there is one, where we're not in a position like many cities were in 2008, where they had to have layoffs and they had really a tremendously difficult time with that economic downturn, especially cities like San Bernardino that are very reliant on sales tax. So the thought with not allocating all of it was really just to be kind of financially conservative and ensure a level of sustainability going forward for the city. But that doesn't imply that it would be a bad thing to allocate more of the funds. That is really staff being very conservative financially. And so I'll go into the slideshow with that. Let me attempt to go into the slideshow with that. Oh, now I've got to get in the right place. All right, an overview of the presentation. I'll give you a bit, talk about the budget calendar, And then revenue forecast for this coming year, including Measure S, just to give you an idea of what else is going on. The Measure S expenditure for continuity of operations as it replaces Measure Z, proposed capital improvement plan, and the other sources of funding for those capital improvements, because of course it isn't only Measure S that funds capital improvements around the city. And then an idea of what council, in case you didn't watch the meeting on Thursday, because I don't anticipate everybody wants to watch every council meeting, what council said when we presented to them staff recommendations on Thursday, what they came back with, and then give you an opportunity to kind of discuss what we're recommending here and what council said on Thursday. So here's our budget calendar so far. Thursday, April 8th was our first budget workshop with council. That was a special meeting. And then, of course, we had the Measure S meeting on April 19th. Then the special meeting with council on May 13th and tonight's meeting. Then we have several more meetings coming up. The next Measure S committee, we haven't determined yet which day that will be. So far, y'all's responses have shown that the 3rd looks a little bit better than the 9th. We've got 4 people saying that the 3rd looks better and 2 people saying that the 9th looks better. So if y'all can respond to that poll that Roxana has put out there, we would really appreciate it so we can be sure to get that 3rd meeting scheduled. That would be great. And hopefully we will have, we're thinking a special meeting for council for budget adoption, but we may not need that. We may be able to do budget adoption on the 16th. I was talking to the city manager about that today, and he thinks we can do the 16th. So, and I trust him on that. Now, forecast revenues. So most revenues are looking quite healthy, actually. Charges for services we anticipate to be up, as well as fines and forfeitures coming back up a little bit, not quite to levels pre-pandemic, but close. Franchise tax is up a little bit. Intergovernmental is down, but that is mostly due to CARES Act funding in this year, which of course was one time. We are not recording in here the American Rescue Plan funds, because that of course skews everything because there's so much of them. So that's not recorded in here. Excuse me. Investment income up just a little because we will have more cash, but interest rates are so low that we don't really anticipate seeing much in the way of increased investment income. Licenses and permits up a little bit. And then you see Measure S there. That's a significant increase. Miscellaneous down a little bit. That's just various things. Other taxes up a little. Property tax in lieu of vehicle license fees, we anticipate being up. Sales and use taxes will be up about 46%, and that is due to an allocation change. So that's a significant improvement over last year and the prior years. Use of money and property, which is like rents on city properties, we anticipate that still being down due to some effects of COVID. And utility users tax has been declining over the last few years, and we anticipate that decline to continue. But overall, revenues will be up probably about 23% over our forecast for the end of this year. So that's pretty healthy. I think that is good news for San Bernardino overall. I think we're in really good shape. And the proposed budget shows expenditures of about $152 million. So it leaves significant reserves in place for the city. All right, so moving on to talking about Measure S specifically, dedicating that, sort of replacement of Measure Z to the budget is, Measure Z was a quarter percent sales tax. So it was 0.25%, and Measure S, that was Measure Z, I'm sorry, Measure S is a 1%. So 1/4 of Measure S is equivalent to Measure Z. So when we determined how much in the end should really be dedicated to those ongoing services, to the continuity of operations, if you will, we decided that it should really be 1/4 of that, of those Measure S revenues, that would be the most sort of equitable way to do it, rather than really looking at what had been the revenue in the past, what was the specific cost of those, positions that had been funded, that probably wasn't the best way to look at it, that it was more reasonable to look at what would Measure Z have been. So for this year, the transfer of the Measure S funds to fund general fund expenditures will be 10.3 million, which is 1/4 of what we anticipate Measure S will bring in. Okay, now we'll move on to the capital improvement program and what we anticipate doing and how much of that will be funded by Measure S. So these are just some cool pictures of things we've done in the last few years in capital improvements. Even with the limited funds that the city has had over the last 4 or 5 years, there have been some really great projects that have been completed. In storm drainage, that's the Patton Basin. You can see where it was all broken up and then was repaired. There's Nunez Field. Palm Avenue median is the neat looking median with the sort of snaky looking center there. Lots of streets projects, and actually 2/3 of the playground equipment throughout the city has been replaced over the last few years. So there have been a lot of projects completed, but given the size of the city, we haven't had the funding to really make the impact that we should have been able to do. So while we've done a lot of really great projects, we're too large a city for the amount of money we've been able to invest. So that's what makes really Measure S, and now the American Rescue Plan funds that we're going to be able to invest as well, really an important thing to this coming budget, and the years to come, especially with Measure S, enabling us to invest more money in this community. So as we're looking at the criteria for investment in capital projects, we had specific things that we looked for. Number one for everything was health and safety. When we're looking at a capital project, the key thing is, the health and safety of the community. Is it an issue that creates a health hazard or a safety issue? And then, the liability that then creates for the city. The asset condition. Is there a pavement condition? Do we have a pavement condition that's failing? Is it poor? What do we have to do to that asset to bring it up to a condition that's good? Community service and programming needs within the community. Is it an item of deferred maintenance? Have we over time put off repairing this asset? And then do we have compliance or legal requirements like ADA requirements to fix an elevator, in a building, or make a restroom ADA requirement, or sidewalks that need curb cutouts for ADA compliance at a crosswalk, things like that. So all of those sort of weigh into our decisions about what specific capital projects we try to do every year. And that was no different this year. We just had more projects that we were able to sort of slot into the funds because there was more funding. Okay, so moving on. Now, no Measure S funding was recommended for storm drainage because we have enough storm drainage DIF funds, the development impact fees, to cover the projects that are ongoing in storm drainage. And that's about 4.2 million in projects. And these are all ongoing projects. The Mount Vernon Avenue storm drains, which y'all have probably seen if you drive down there, and these photos are from there. And then we have connector pipe screen projects that are going on, which actually prevent trash from going into the system. And that's a California requirement, a state requirement. And then we have annual upgrades all over the city. And storm drain upgrades actually happen every time we do a street We work on the curb and gutters and try to make sure that if there's flooding issues on that street, Alex actually went into this, and so now I learned something. We will make the gutters deeper and try to make them hold more water so that the streets don't flood as easily when it rains. So I learn things every time Alex Keishta speaks in a meeting. And then with buildings, overall, we're investing $10 million approximately, and that's in library improvements, community center upgrades, a new animal shelter, which of course will just be designed this year because it will take a while to do that. The 66ers Stadium, rehabbing that. California Theater, that will be an assessment of what those needs are because of course that's going to take a while. And then planning for City Hall. Of that, Measure S, we're only recommending $1,775,000, but that's for buildings. Traffic controls and street lighting, $5.6 million overall, and of that, $2.8 million from Measure S, and that Measure S is just for street lighting restorations around the city for safety of pedestrian and motorists. Those are some pretty high impact projects in the city, especially on E Street from Baseline to Highland. And that's a major project, restoring that lighting, and then some other critical lighting restorations. And Parks and Recreation, $9.4 million in projects. Particularly working on some of the restrooms and the ball field accessory buildings. If any of y'all work with the Little Leagues, in the past we have had the facilities that they use, these buildings that are like these accessory buildings to the ball fields. We have always sort of ceded control of those to these Little League groups, and they have been responsible for the upkeep of those buildings. And that hasn't been a good model either from an asset management perspective for the city, and it hasn't been very equitable as far as those groups, because some of those groups, of course, have more money than others, and they're better able to upkeep those buildings. And it's just not a very fair model. So, some of them are falling apart. Well, most of them are falling apart because they're decades old. But they are city assets. So we believe that the city should replace them all. That's the plan. And that the city should take over the upkeep of those for those groups, even though they are used by the Little Leagues. We think as city assets, there's something that the city should maintain. So that's one of the projects. It'll take 4 years to replace all of those, and then replacing restrooms citywide in the parks, doing citywide smart irrigation. We have irrigation systems in most of the parks, but this would be setting up a smart irrigation system where it can all be controlled remotely. And then if irrigation fails somewhere, like if something breaks and water's going everywhere, we would actually get an alert that says, hey, the irrigation has failed at Paris Hill Park. And then we could go out and fix that and not have crazy loss of water. So it's a great conservation project as well. And then Roosevelt Bowl renovation, field lighting at the parks, softball and baseball infield refurbishments, and field and facility improvements, So lots of really great parks improvements. And then streets projects are the most significant investment at $25.7 million. I don't have them all listed here. I have them all. If you're interested in seeing all of the projects specifically, I do have them all for y'all to look at. But there are lots and lots of them. Some of the key things that we are working on are the Mount Vernon Avenue Bridge replacement, which obviously is underway, and that's a partnership. A raised median along Kendall Drive from E to H. That's an area where we see head-on accidents, where people, we need a median there to stop that from happening. The University Parkway and I-215, State Street Extension, that's an ongoing project that we've had to work with getting permits for from the state So that's taken a while. And Kendall Drive, the slope stabilization there. And then the citywide streets rehab is actually some of the bulk of the money we're looking to spend Measure S on is for working on the complete reconstruction of streets that are rated failing, grind and overlay of streets that are rated poor, and then slurry and crack seal is streets that are rated fair. So depending on the rating of streets, we do, different treatments on them. But those are what will help us to get the streets all to a much better rating across the city, or that street rehab program across the city. So those are our recommendations for all of the capital projects in the city. And then our overall Measure S funding recommendations are here, and we have our operations support of $10.3 million. And then our CIP of about $22,075,000 for a total recommended use of Measure S funds of $32,375,000, which leaves Measure S funds of $16,700,000. And then other capital improvement funding. Said I would talk about that a little bit. These are the other sources of funding in capital improvements. This doesn't include Measure S and then the American Rescue Plan Act, because we don't have all of that programmed at all. But we have the various sources of development impact fees, and then community development block grant and highway safety improvement program grant funds as well. So we have quite a few sources of capital improvement funds. None of them are huge amounts of money. Measure I is the largest as far as other sources of revenue at almost, it's 6.7 million, but it's not an enormous amount of money, especially when you think that to really have an impact this year, we're recommending almost 26 million in streets. So it's a significantly larger impact, significantly larger investment, than we've been able to make in some years in streets. Okay, and then council on May 13th made some pretty specific recommendations about different things they wanted to add. And I don't want to go into great detail with this, but I will be sure to have Roxana email everyone this PowerPoint so that you have it to review. They recommended additions in community and economic development for code enforcement. They recommended significant additions in the police department. Business registration kind of dovetails with community economic development. It was really for code enforcement and enforcement of sidewalk vending. Those kind of go together. Public works, they also recommended additions there. They made recommendations of increases in human resources, general government, parks and recreation, the city manager's office, and then they made significant additional recommendations in capital improvements, about 12 or 13 additional segments of streets, some additional fencing in parks and other locations, and some additional parks investments. So we haven't costed everything out yet. We're working on that to kind of give them an idea of what all those different packages would cost, so that they can determine, what they feel like they want to actually add to the budget, depending on what it's going to cost.
And Barbara, let me point something out. They only suggested one additional assistant city manager, not two.
Did they? I couldn't figure that out. So
yeah, they wanted to add one to the existing, just to be clear. And that was not at staff's request. It was not that it was unwelcome or anything, but it was not at staff's request. So.
On that, Barbara, I'm sorry, on that
yes, go ahead.
that you had, under general government, I see that you have ongoing funding to California Theater
Yes,
per year. That was the recommendation.
yes. It was a recommendation of, I think, operational support of $75,000 a year.
How much business are they getting?
I do not know. I'm sorry.
And the only reason why I'm interested in that is because if the city's going to be funding that, and I wanted to know, are they going to be providing ways and means for our school district and our kids to be able to enjoy the theater like that with us funding that?
That's an ongoing discussion. I can answer that really quickly. That's an ongoing topic of discussion. Certainly, we want to see more and broader use. Mr. Cummings' answer is, certainly during COVID, it's been, essentially shut down.
Right.
But we're in the process. We're reassessing how the facility is managed right now. We're also looking to make some pretty significant investments in it to bring it back up to a higher standard. Matter of fact, we're requesting a supplemental request to the state tomorrow for additional funding. So we're looking at all kinds of different ways to bring the theater back. It's a great asset. It needs to see more use.
Definitely. Just wanted to make sure that our youth and our high schools and theater departments are being able to be utilized and to be able to participate in some type of way as well. To be able to enjoy that upgrade. That's just a notation, because I'm an arts advocate. So
And Ms. Whitehorn, I got a question about the human resources with the diversity and inclusion officer.
Yes.
So will this include training for all city employees? When we think about police department, all our government officials and things like that, will that be a part of this funding? And with this diversity and inclusion officer that's being proposed?
That I don't know. This particular position was not a staff request. Actually, training and all of that was part of a specific program requested by staff in the budget. So that was not debated. So I think that was already sort of, council was okay with the program that was already proposed. The officer was in addition to that. So the HR had already proposed a full diversity and inclusion and equity program, including blinding of applications, additional recruiting, and training throughout the city. So I think this was just an additional position to add to all of that.
So will this position be in charge of making sure the training is implemented and kind of recorded, from the standpoint? When I think about a diversity and inclusion officer, I think of the person being responsible for making sure and ensuring that the training is being done, and not just having a position to just say when I think of a diversity and inclusion officer, I think of that's the person that's going to ensure that training is being done, throughout the year, or however, when we talk about bias training, when we think about hiring and things like that, that's what I'm thinking about as a diversity and inclusion officer.
So I think, Barbara, if I could, let's kick it over to Eddie. Our HR director's on, so let's let her take a crack at this really quickly.
Excellent.
Thank you so much, Rob. So at a very high level, this position will be enhancing our diversity and inclusion in our hiring process. So from the time that you apply all the way through the life cycle. And yes, I do envision training specific to diversity and inclusion falling under this specific position that the council recommended.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We had a question regarding the code enforcement. Do we have that on here? It's not on this one. Yes, it was on there. I guess that council had recommended. I wanted to see under our VIP, our violence and prevention program. I wanted to know if there's a way that we could hire some of those individuals that we're working with in prevention and prevention in order to hire them in order to do some code enforcement work. Instead of having 9 additional code enforcement officials, by allowing some of our already partnerships to be able to have some of those positions for intervention prevention programming.
I am not sure how to answer that.
I was just saying, because the reason why I'm saying that is because you are getting ready to go into cost. So I want to be able to say that now because I would like us to look at using some of our individuals that are needing some funding, but not necessarily will be a major cost like a staffer cost, but still could be able to get a job, and it would be in relation to our intervention prevention programs.
Okay, so I think some of the stuff, these are primarily, these are issues that are still being fleshed out. So
no, that's why I'm saying that,
yeah.
like to put that on the list as potential, so can we look at that in order to get some additional jobs to some of our individuals that's working in our violence program.
Let us take a look, and we're looking at a comprehensive list of issues that's been brought to us. So let us take a look at that. And Reverend Veronica, if you're okay, we will probably talk to you directly about this offline.
Okay.
It's an offline discussion topic, I think. So we'll get back to you. Okay.
But are you finished, Barbara, with your PowerPoint?
Essentially, yes.
Okay, so any of my commissioners, do you have a particular slide that, while Barbara still has her slides up, that you would like to look at and address from the slide point?
Yeah, I have a question.
Okay, who is that? I'm sorry, I can't see.
Rick.
Okay, Rick, thank you.
I'm in the Parks and Rec committee as well. What type of security are you going to have for the parks? Set additional security. You going to have security guards or gates or more lighting? What type of security are you going to have?
A combination.
Okay.
We're still sorting that out. We're still costing things out. We're becoming accustomed to this brave new world of ours, where we have some additional funding. It's not unlimited, so we have to be sort of guarded in terms of what we obligate the city to, because the last thing we want to do is put ourselves back into a condition of fiscal distress like we've experienced in the past. So part of our approach on all the additional requests from council members for things to be considered as possibles on going forward, we have to cost these things out. So, for the most part, these none of these are inexpensive requests. So we're going to sort that out and bring them back to council. It was such a significant additional request for additional staff and other forms of expenditures that we are actually going to be bringing this back, I think, on June 2nd with associated cost estimates. So when you look at this, the only one that's got a solid number on it is $600,000 additional for equipment. Everything else has got potential costs associated with it, which we have to define for the council and put it into a list and compare that with available resources. Our recommendations will be based on that, and of course, again, our commitment to being fiscally conservative, fiscally responsible. We have, and we've told you this before, excuse me, we're trying to figure out what Measure S revenues actually end up looking like. We have a pretty good idea, but they're based on projections, and we want to get a year or two of Measure S under our belts before we obligate too much of any of the city's resources, especially to the ongoing kind of really expensive components of the city's budget, which is always personnel. You know, one-time money for CIP projects is one thing, and we're not running into any opposition on any of those. The question really boils down to what do we want to do what do we want to invest the city's future resources in with respect to staff and other ongoing expenses that really work in perpetuity, things like reopening the city jail, for example. So there's quite a bit of additional evaluation that needs to be done.
Did you say reopening the city jail?
That's one of the options that was brought forward as a possibility by
Right
the council. Yes.
Oh, I see. Evaluate reopening the city jail. I'm sorry. Was that you, Cliff? You had something?
Yeah, question. I'm looking at police department, certainly support that, but additional parking enforcement is nice, but parked cars don't kill people. Drunk drivers, people running red lights constantly, 10 seconds after they're red, absolute disregard for stop signs. That's what kill people. And I keep hearing, oh, we're too busy, we're too busy. I don't know what the body count has to be, but are we going to have specific recommendations for these 15 new officers to help with some semblance of traffic control in the city?
Well, the initial, that's still being sorted out. The initial recommendation in the budget was for 5 additional officers, all of whom would have been in traffic enforcement. So with the change in the request the requested change from council, that's still being sorted out. The one thing I should point out when it comes to additional parking enforcement, one of the things that's driving that, no pun intended, or maybe it is intended, I don't know. Anyway, is, I see a couple of you laughing, thank you. The need to comply with a bunch of environmental regulations. We can get fined. If our streets are not able to be swept, then we will be fined. So we need parking enforcement to make that happen, actually. It is parking enforcement and signs and an upgrade to our ordinance and a bunch of other stuff so that we can be prepared to respond in the event that some of the regulatory agencies come a calling. We have to be able to sweep, and that's an important thing. That's where the request for additional parking enforcement officers comes from.
I do have one more. I have a question, Commissioner Roberson, Ward 5, about the additional 15 officers for the police department. I see in the proposed budget is to fill a vacancy for the lieutenant, also a sergeant, and 4 patrol officers. So with these additional 15 officers, I understand about drunk drivers and things like that, and I support that. But can some of these officers be kind of community officers, work in the community, build community relations with the communities? When I think about our police department and rebuilding their trust with our community, I think it'll be important if some of these officers can be strictly community officers kind of going forward, if that can be a possibility. That would be one of my recommendations to the council. I understand we need patrol officers, but we also need officers in the community, rebuilding those communications and relationships as well.
Okay, fair enough. We'll include that as a comment from the Measure S committee.
Venus Williams, Ward number 1. I know that we're going to be doing streets. Are some of these streets going to be in our neighborhoods? Because, I know large trucks aren't allowed in their neighborhoods, but when we have the refuge trucks come through and they are damaging the streets, I've been living over here for 35 years, haven't seen anybody come and repair anything. And because of the trucks, like where my water meter is, the water department had repaired the sidewalk some years ago when I was still working. Now it is busting up again around that water meter, and that's because of the trash trucks. And so are we going to be doing residential streets as well as I know we're going to be doing main streets. But see, sometimes I know where the main streets are. I've worked with the city. I saw what was going on. And so to me, as citizens, we're paying taxes too. My taxes should not just go for Main Street, it should go for the neighborhood also too that we live in, that, we're trying to keep up. And so I want to know, are we going to be doing some of the residential streets that need to be taken care of?
I mean, I think the short answer is yeah. Chris Jensen is on here. She's Public Works Director, right? Chris, do you want to take a shot at this one?
I'm sure, and I'm actually going to lean on Mr. Alex Kishta because I don't know. I know that we had a giant packet, and I know that there's a lot of information in terms of the streets that we're looking at. I know that we've got a combination of probably the main thoroughfares as well as residential areas. When we pull the information for putting these packages together, it's a data-driven process. We have a pavement management system that we use that we basically, we have gone through the city and we have rated the condition of various streets, whether they be residential or kind of the more main arterials. And so when we pull that information up, that's kind of where we start. I know many of the residential areas, particularly because of trash trucks and or, decades of street sweeping, are deteriorated. I think Alex can kind of give us an idea maybe of, Alex, is it 50-50? Is it 25, 75 in terms of residential on what we've proposed?
Good evening, Chair and Council Member. Yes, to answer the questions, we are mixing both residential streets and main thoroughfare within the next year CIP. So there is some residential streets going to be done as part of the CIP. That's correct.
Thank you. Because I know that over the years, the material that's been used has gotten changed because of the environmental impact, and so it doesn't last as long. So, I mean, that's not your fault. And I know that's not your fault, but it's because of what the government requires.
The pavement of the street usually is not the same as when they do the potholing, fixing.
Oh, I know about potholes.
Yeah, it's just like, it's completely different. We go down depending on the street and the case. Usually we could take the street completely out. We put a new street with sub base. Usually, some instances we grind 2 or 3 inches, put back. It will be a steadier and better street that can last for the next. We try to make it last for the next 10 to 15 years.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Robertson from the Ward 5. I got another question. Do we have a plan for the American Rescue Plan funding? And also, I do have a IT question for the information technology. Have we ever looked at putting wireless access points in parks and recreation so our especially our youth can go to those parks and recreations and log on to the Wi-Fi for school and things like that? Have we looked at those things as far as the information technology for the city to kind of incorporate those WAPs in our parks, so our wireless access points in our parks and recreations throughout the city?
Rob, would you like to take that one, or you want me to take that one?
Yeah. As far as the wireless access points, I think it might actually be as a combination of the parks director and the and IT. So why don't we go to Jim Tickmeyer first. Jim, you want to take a shot at this?
Yeah, we're working on having wireless access points at all of our community centers currently. The only park that we currently have that has open wireless access is Bryce Haynes Park on 9th and East Street. I haven't really worked with IT to establish that network at our existing parks, but it's definitely something that we could look at potentially adding and see what the cost would be associated with that.
Yes, I just want to make sure it's equity across the city, not just in one park, right? So when we think about wireless access for our youth in the community, I think it needs to be equitable across all parks and recs. So if we can definitely look into that, that would be greatly appreciated.
We do have wireless access at our community centers and our libraries. So it's being added to the city as we can. Just want to make sure that everybody's aware of that.
But how many community centers do we have in the city of San Bernardino?
We have a total of 8, including our 2 senior centers and the CID. So the CID is specifically for our developmentally disabled. And then we have the 2 senior centers and 5 open community centers.
And so when I'm thinking about community centers, I'm talking about for our youth, right? So in what wards are those community centers are located currently?
Oh, currently ward-wise, we have, I would have to gather that information. I know we have 1st ward covered, 3rd ward covered, 6th ward is covered, 5th ward is covered. I don't believe we have an existing community center in the 7th ward or the 4th ward. But those 2 wards have, well, I know the 4th ward has a library that provides that service.
Okay.
Ms. Barbara, you had stated that all the calculation numbers didn't include the American Rescue Fund. That is excluding the American Rescue Fund. Do we have a timeline that we need to spend the American Rescue Fund?
I believe we have 3 years to spend those, or at least commit them. We don't have the final guidelines for how they can be spent or exactly how long we have to spend them. We got some initial guidelines, but you know how the federal government is. They're not great on providing fantastic guidelines when they first get started. They like to kind of give you sort of vague guidelines that are also a little bit more restrictive, and then they'll come out with better guidance. So we're anticipating better guidance to come out pretty soon. And then we'll be able to come up with a solid plan for how to use them. I think at this point, we're hoping to get a better idea of what's eligible for those funds, and then we can come up with a solid plan. We don't have really solid guidance at this point.
Okay. Thank you. I see we have our Commissioner Gloria that has made it. As any one of my commissioners, welcome Gloria. Anyone else would like to say anything specific to Barbara about the PowerPoint as it's still posted up?
I believe Gloria has her hand raised.
Oh, okay. I can't see because of the PowerPoint. So that's.
I'm here.
Okay, great. Gloria, go ahead on and speak.
I just had a few questions. One, with the public works itinerary, is that going to include community cleanups for that 600K? I mean, or whatever amount? Is that going to include like where you go in each ward and clean up debris, mattresses, couches, things of that nature?
Oh, the equipment purchase?
Equipment purchase, or anywhere in the budget we could actually see where we're utilizing that money to clean up our city.
I think really ultimately that's really more of an operation. We're concentrating more on personnel and CIP issues here. So that's more of an operations issue, operations question, Chris. I mean, I think we do that on a fairly regular basis already anyway. But Chris, you want to tackle this real quick?
Sure. So, good evening, Commissioner. So we have a few different ways for kind of those
Chris,
community.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Before you start, I'm gonna ask Barbara, would you take off the PowerPoint so that I can look and see everyone, please? Thank you. Okay. All right, Chris.
Sure.
Now, so people can see who's speaking.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So you know, we schedule monthly dump days, if you will, and we rotate through the wards the best we can for and set up areas at the end of every month for residents to be able to bring things, right, to drop off their large items and whatnot, so that we have that set up through our Birchrise franchise agreement. We also have, if there are illegal dumps that are reported, we do have a right-of-way crew, a team out there who is trying to address those things as well. So in terms of our operational budget, we do have varying ways that we get out there and get those things cleared up off the right-of-way. If what you're talking about is funding that is specific to kind of a programmed cleanup in each area, that isn't necessarily something that we have designated because we're all over the city all the time. But if that's something funding-wise that the commission wants to recommend, it's something that we could look at. But we do have other programs and designated times and places where residents can take kind of that bulk trash.
Well, living in the second ward, I think it's imperative because not all wards have the same issues. I understand that. But I'm just saying if we could find it within the budget or within somewhere in these sectors of categories where community cleanup is imperative, or mattresses, hygiene, you know, we're dealing with this on a regular basis. And you have designated dump days, but our neighbors dump any day in the community and not at the assigned locations.
Sure. Well, and I think the other piece too is if for anyone that's not aware, there are also free bulky item pickups for residential customers at their homes. So if you actually are having a situation where your neighbors are just setting things out at the curb, maybe they're not aware that all they have to do is give Burtec a call, and they've got some free pickups every year for that. If it's a situation where it's an illegal dump, give us a call and we'll take a look and we'll get somebody out there to handle it. So.
And then secondly, and then I'm done. I noticed on the police area, it stated that they wanted to reopen the jails, but aren't we paying for more prevention and intervention? So what's the point of incarceration prevention if they're trying to reopen the jail?
I would say that actually is not a police department request. It was a request from the city council for an evaluation. So it was just an idea that was floated out there. I don't think so. We will evaluate it and bring back the potential costs associated with that.
Yeah, because if you're already paying for intervention and prevention, that would be an additional cost.
Well, in addition, which we also have, I think part of the motivation there is to save the time and money associated with transporting people back and forth to the county jail. So it's something out there as another sort of potential efficiency opportunity, if that's if possible in this situation. But it is not something that's hard and fast, and I don't believe that request actually came from the police department.
Okay, I just didn't their category. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was a suggestion for evaluation on the part of a member of the city council.
Okay.
So we're going to evaluate it and bring it back to the council for their consideration.
Thank you.
Also, too, Venus Williams, Ward Number 1, if I'm correct, unless they change, that was just a short-term stay at the jail. You know, it's not something that's long-term like they do at the county jail. So unless they change the procedures, it's just a short-term stay. And then the transportation was the ones who transported them to the county jail. So
they need a porter.
Yeah.
Well, I noticed we have the staffing, Mr. Field, that you have from different departments, and we have definitely our new commissioner, Derek, too. Can you have them introduce themselves and say who they are so that and what they do? So if we have additional questions, we can ask.
Certainly. I mean, we can just go through the entire roster of city folks here if you'd like.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so I'm looking at the screen. We've already met Barbara. And Eddie Evelund, who is Adelia Evelund, is our Human Resources Director. You want me to just go through and introduce everybody? I mean.
Yes, you can do that.
Okay, all right. Okay, so Eddie, Chris Jensen, of course, our Public Works Director. Ed Urjevec, who is our Library Director. Jim Tickmeyer, who's Parks Recreation Director. Mike Huntley, who runs Community and Economic Development. Rebecca Kramer cannot come on. She's actually traveling. However, she's here listening in. And she's actually, as I said, traveling right now. Alex Kishta is the city engineer. Roxana Angel from the city clerk's office. Sam Singery, who is the deputy director of our budget and finance. So he basically is the number 2 under Barbara Whitehorn. Eric McBride, I think you all know who that guy is with us this evening as well. Shelby Bergwan, who works in finance under Barbara Whitehorn. David Green, who's the assistant chief of police under Eric McBride. And Chris Watson, last but by no means least. Chris, sorry, but you were the last one on my page here, is our animal services director. So you have pretty much all of the department heads in the city participating this evening. So actually, since you brought it up, Reverend Bronica, I want to thank all of them for being here this evening. This is a very important part of the budget process, so I'm glad they're all able to join us this evening.
Absolutely. We definitely want to thank you. And that's why it's so very important that we do go over it again to see who's here so that we can not waste your time, but definitely if we have questions, we can be able to, you can be able to directly respond to us. Any commissioners would like to say anything to any of these leads that are here today? Nope. Okay. Barbara, are we concluding your area, or Mr. Fields? Is that a conclusion?
I think it is from the staff side, unless our finance director, Barbara Whitehorn, has anything that she would like to add. Is there anything additional, Barbara, that we should convey?
No, thank you. I really appreciate your time tonight, and all of your comments will be conveyed to council.
Yes, and we do hope, just from the staff side, I do want to thank everybody for participating. Everybody on the committee, we know your time is valuable and limited, and we made a promise to you early on that we were going to involve you actively and take your input seriously and bring it back to the council, and that's precisely what we're going to do. So we really appreciate what you're doing for the city by participating in this committee. And also, we kind of want to celebrate the fact that we actually have something meaningful to weigh in on here too, because the proceeds from Measure S are significant, and they're going to make a big difference for the city going forward. So we look forward to continuing to work with you on this process as we continue to allocate funds and kind of, give a little bit of a, sort of participate in the rebirth of this great city. So thank you.
Thank
Barbara,
you.
Barbara, you are going to make sure we get a copy of your PowerPoint you did, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Yes, good. If someone didn't hear, Ms. Venus from Ward 1, she was for all of us to get a copy of the presentation that Ms. Barbara Whitehorn presented to us today. Again, thank you for the presentation. Thank you, all of you, for coming and being available. I do want to end with a quote, as I always do. We must use time wisely and forever realize that the time is always right to do what's right. And that is Nelson Mandela. I hope you have a good night, and we look forward to continue to working and making our city great, as Mr. Fields said. So with that, meeting is adjourned.
Thank you all.
Okay.
Thanks.
Good night.
Everybody.